He looked at me like he knew. Like every glance I thought was invisible had been seen, studied, and stored away. And just like that, 3 years of silence between us began to crack. I should have looked away. I didn't. Trevor and I had been best friends since the start of freshman year. What began as a random dorm assignment turned into a bond that outlasted breakups, finals, and too many midnight gym sessions. He was bold, magnetic, the guy who never had to try. I was quieter, the listener, the one who laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. That night, everything felt normal. Just two guys lifting, teasing each other, pushing through reps like we always did. Trevor had more energy than usual, making every set a competition. I should have seen it then, the way he kept brushing against me, always staying close. Too close for someone who wasn't into guys. "You're slacking," he grinned, spotting me during a final bench press set. "3 more. Don't embarrass us." I grunted, barely holding the bar, but his voice made me try harder. That was the problem. Trevor could make me do anything. Afterward, we walked back to my apartment, the city humming around us. I had offered him food as usual, and we slipped into routine like nothing was off. But something was off. I could feel it in the pauses between our jokes, in the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't watching. "Dating apps are trash," he muttered, digging into a leftover slice of pizza. "Everyone's fake, like they're playing characters instead of just being real." I nodded, not because I had anything to say, but because I was too busy trying not to smile like an idiot at the fact that he was still single. By the time we turned on the game, silence had settled between us. Not awkward, not hostile. Heavy, like something was waiting just outside the room. Trevor kept losing. Badly. "Dude, what's going on? You're playing like someone's grandma." I joked, nudging his knee with mine. He didn't laugh. He set the controller down, ran a hand through his damp hair, and said, "You ever feel like you're about to say something that'll screw everything up?" My heart froze. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Sometimes." He looked at me, really looked, and I felt my skin burn under the weight of it. But then he stood up and said casually, "Mind if I use your shower?" That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way my pulse spiked, the way my thoughts went somewhere they shouldn't. I nodded and told him he knew where everything was. The sound of water running behind the bathroom door did nothing to calm me down. I tried focusing on the game. Failed. I stared at the door instead, wondering what the hell was happening to me. And then, his voice. "Hey, can you come here for a sec?" My brain short-circuited. He sounded calm, like this was no big deal. It was a big deal. I stood up, palms sweating, and walked toward the steam-filled hallway. "You decent?" I asked, wincing at how stupid it sounded. He laughed. "As decent as I'm gonna get. Just come in." The door wasn't locked. That fact did something strange to me, half fear, half hope. I pushed it open. Steam spilled out. The curtain was mostly closed, but through the fog I could see his silhouette. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. A beat of silence. Then his voice quieter. "You've been weird lately." I froze. "Weird?" "Yeah, distant. Like you're trying to keep something from me. And I didn't want to push, but now I kind of need to know. Because it's starting to mess with my head." The water shut off. I heard him grab the curtain, pause. "I see the way you look at me, Ryan." My name on his lips made my stomach twist. "I've been ignoring it," he said, telling myself I imagined it, but I didn't. I couldn't move, could barely breathe. I should be mad, maybe. I don't know, but I'm not. I need to understand what this is. Because if I'm being honest. He trailed off, then pulled the curtain halfway open. Not all the way. Just enough so I could see his face. Still damp. Flushed. Not just from heat. "I think about you more than I should." I swallowed hard. "Trevor, just tell me I'm wrong," he said. "Tell me I made this up. I'll leave, and we can pretend none of this happened. But if I'm not wrong." His voice broke. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a game. This wasn't Trevor playing around like he always did. This was real. He was scared, vulnerable. So was I. I could have said anything. Could have lied. But instead I said the one thing that had haunted me for months. "You're not wrong." And just like that, The ground shifted beneath us. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, steam clinging to his skin, staring at me like he was still trying to figure out if this was real. I expected a smile, maybe relief, maybe even something reckless like another kiss, but he just nodded slowly, stepped back into the bathroom, and said, "Okay, cool, cool." That word hit harder than I expected. I waited for him to say more. He didn't. I handed him a towel, our fingers brushed, and he thanked me like we were still just roommates or teammates or whatever the hell we were pretending to be. I left him there, heart pounding in my throat, wondering how something so intense could unravel so quietly. We didn't talk much after that. He got dressed. I stayed on the couch, watching the same game menu screen blink for 20 silent minutes. When he came back out, he grabbed his phone, mumbled something about needing to head home early, and left without looking back. The door clicked shut behind him, and I felt like I'd been shoved into a vacuum. For 3 years, we had talked about everything. Now there was only this gaping, awkward silence neither of us knew how to fill. The next day, I texted him. Simple stuff. "You good? Want to grab lunch? Last night, we should probably talk." Nothing. Just the gray, delivered icon staring back at me. By the third day, I stopped trying. My messages weren't ignored. They were avoided. I saw him on campus, once near the student center, once at the gym. Each time he looked through me like I didn't exist. Something inside me cracked. And then came the rumors. It started small, whispers, a few weird glances. A guy from our philosophy class snorted when I walked in, like I was the punchline of some private joke. By the end of the week, someone had taken it too far. "Yo, Ryan, didn't know you liked your bros that much." I froze in the hallway. A couple guys snickered as they passed. One of them was wearing Trevor's hoodie. Trevor didn't stand up for me. Worse, I found out he was the one who told them. He'd flipped the story, made it sound like I'd come on to him, that he hadn't known how to react, that things got confusing, but it was a mistake. My mistake. The betrayal burned. But what made it worse was that he had the power to stop it and chose not to. I cornered him outside one of our lectures the following Monday. The moment he saw me, his expression went blank. "Why?" I asked, my voice low, shaking. "Why would you lie?" "Don't do this here," he muttered, trying to walk past. "No," I stepped in front of him. "You kissed me. You told me you thought about me. And now I'm the joke?" His jaw clenched. I panicked, okay? I didn't think. You did think. You chose to throw me under the bus because you're scared of who you are. "Stop," he hissed, eyes darting to the people walking by. "Just stop." I stared at him for a second, suddenly so tired I could barely stand. "I trusted you." He looked down, didn't answer. That night I packed up my dorm, told housing I needed to transfer to another building, filed paperwork to study abroad the next semester. Anything to get out, get away. It was like grieving a person who was still alive. He didn't text, didn't call, and I didn't either. But some nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd check his Instagram. Nothing had changed. He was still hanging out with the same guys, still posting gym selfies, still tagging that girl he'd started flirting with around the same time he kissed me in my bathroom. Part of me wanted to hate him. The other part kept replaying the way he'd looked at me before everything fell apart. Like maybe, for a second, it had meant something real. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was how quickly he moved on. A week after our confrontation, Trevor made it official with Kaylee, a girl from the cheer squad who had never looked twice at him before. Now they were inseparable, walking across campus with their hands tangled, posting inside jokes online, showing up together at every party. And I was invisible. People didn't just whisper anymore. They looked, like I was something they'd been warned about. Some guys stopped talking to me altogether. A few classmates avoided sitting next to me in lectures. No one said anything outright, but it was enough. I got the message. Trevor had painted the picture perfectly. Confused straight guy, pursued by his gay best friend, who'd made a move and then couldn't handle the rejection. He didn't have to lie directly. He just had to let people draw their own conclusions. And they did. I stopped going to the gym, stopped eating with anyone, Stopped trying to explain myself to people who had already decided I was the problem. Even professors started looking at me strangely when my participation dropped. But what was I supposed to say? Sorry I'm failing this course. Someone I trusted humiliated me in front of an entire campus. One Friday afternoon after a seminar, I caught a glimpse of Trevor across the quad. He was laughing, tossing a football with a few friends, Kaylee sitting nearby in a circle of girls. He saw me and looked away. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I just stopped feeling until the campus party. I hadn't planned on going. Parties weren't my thing even when things were good, but something about that night made me say yes when my lab partner invited me. I needed air, noise, anything other than my thoughts. The house was packed, sweaty bodies, loud music, fake smiles. I stuck near the kitchen, sipping warm soda and pretending to text. And then I saw them, Trevor and Kaylee, halfway through the living room, surrounded by friends, his hand on her waist, her laughter spilling too loudly over the music. He was performing, and I knew it. He leaned in, kissed her, slow and exaggerated. People cheered. It was a show. For them. For me. I turned to leave, but someone behind me, some guy from Trevor's group, tapped my shoulder. "Hey, just curious," he said loudly. "You and Trevor, was that real? Or just wishful thinking on your end?" Laughter. Not just his. Others joined in. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I turned around, looked straight at Trevor. "You want to tell them?" I asked, loud enough for the music to drop around us. The laughter stopped. "What?" he said, already defensive. "You kissed me. Remember? In my apartment. After the gym." The room went still. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't angry. I was just done. "I didn't lie about anything," I said. "But you did." His jaw flexed. "Dude, stop." "No," I cut in. "You let them laugh. You let them think I'm crazy. You let me take the hit so you wouldn't have to deal with your own confusion. That's not protecting yourself. That's just cowardice." He took a step forward. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain it," I said, arms crossed. "Explain why you kissed me. Explain why you said it meant something. Explain why you ghosted me the next day and turned me into a joke." People were staring, phones out, whispers rippling through the crowd. Kaylee looked like she wanted to vanish. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Trevor said finally, voice low. "But you did," I said, "and you knew exactly what you were doing." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, down the steps, across the yard, heart pounding, but not from fear, from release. That was the last time I spoke to him. He tried messaging me once, 2 days later. Just, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Because sorry isn't enough when someone burns your name into the ground and watches you choke on the smoke. The days after the party were quiet, too quiet. No more whispers, no more jokes. Just silence, the kind that settles in after a storm. For a while, I thought that was it. I thought I'd burned the last bridge that tied me to him, and maybe I had. But oddly, it felt less like a loss and more like finally stepping out of a room that had been slowly filling with smoke. I started showing up to class again, talked to a couple people I hadn't spoken to since before the whole mess. Not everyone believed me. Some probably never would, but I didn't need them to anymore. Something had shifted, in me. Then, weeks later, it happened. I was walking across the quad, earbuds in, heading toward the library when I heard my name. "Ryan!" I turned. It was Ethan, a guy from our building, someone Trevor had always been close with. We weren't friends, not really, but he wasn't hostile either. Just part of Trevor's world. "You got a sec?" he asked, a little out of breath. I nodded cautiously. "I wasn't going to say anything," he started, eyes scanning the area around us. "But I think you deserve to know." He hesitated. Then, "At that party, after you left," Trevor kind of lost it. I didn't respond. "He got drunk, really drunk, kept saying he messed everything up, that he should have handled things differently. He said," Ethan swallowed, "he said you were the only person who ever really saw him, and that he hated himself for pushing you away." The words hit harder than I expected. He said that? I asked, voice quiet. Ethan nodded. Look, I don't know what went down between you two. I'm not taking sides, but that didn't sound like someone who was just confused. It sounded like someone who was scared of himself, of everyone. I wanted to scream, to cry, to rewind months and say everything that needed saying before it all fell apart. But it was too late for that. Thank, I said finally, for telling me. He nodded and walked off, leaving me alone with something heavier than anger. Clarity. Trevor had been scared. Maybe he still was. But fear didn't excuse betrayal, and it didn't undo the damage. Still, that night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about what Ethan said. You were the only person who ever really saw him. A few days later, we saw each other again. By accident. It was a student leadership conference. I had signed up for the academic credit. So had he, apparently. When I spotted him across the room, my stomach twisted. I could have walked out. I didn't. During a breakout session, we ended up at the same table. He looked up. I expected guilt, regret, shame. What I saw instead was something raw, like he'd been waiting for this moment and didn't know what to do with it now that it was here. After the session, he followed me outside. Can we talk? He asked. I didn't answer, but I didn't walk away either. We sat on a low wall behind the building, a few feet apart, the early spring air biting through the awkward silence. I was a coward, he said finally. I didn't argue. I didn't know who I was. I still don't, not completely, but I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. This time the apology landed differently. Why me? I asked. Why say all those things that night if you weren't ready to stand by them? He looked down. Because I meant them. I just didn't know what to do after. I thought, maybe if I ignored it, it would go away, that I'd go back to being normal. I let out a bitter laugh. And what's that? Straight? He flinched. I don't know. All I know is that I miss you. Not just the idea of you. You. I miss laughing over stupid stuff and late-night gym runs and knowing I could say anything and you'd get it. I miss the one person I never had to pretend around. My throat tightened, but I held steady. You don't get to say that and expect things to go back to how they were, I said. You didn't just hurt me. You humiliated me. Let people tear me apart so you could stay comfortable. He nodded. I know, and I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I never stopped caring, and I wish I'd been braver. For the first time, I believed him. He stood to leave. But before he turned, he added quietly, You weren't wrong that night. About us. We were never just friends. And then he was gone. No big scene, no desperate plea. Just the truth left between us like a closed book neither of us knew how to reopen. It didn't end with a kiss. It didn't end with forgiveness. It ended with understanding. And maybe that's all I ever needed. I used to think closure meant having a final conversation. The kind where everything is laid out clean, both people say what needs to be said, and then they walk away with lighter hearts. But real closure doesn't usually come like that. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone at a coffee shop, rereading the same message for the 10th time, and realizing you don't need to reply. Sometimes it's waking up one morning and realizing the anger's gone. Not because it was resolved, but because you're finally done carrying it. That's where I found myself a few weeks after our last conversation. I didn't text Trevor. He didn't text me again. There was nothing left to say. But something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for answers. Not for him. I started spending more time with people who saw me without conditions. I joined a campus LGBTQ+ group, something I'd always been too nervous to do. And yeah, it was awkward at first. I felt like a fraud, like I didn't belong. But then I told them everything. The kiss, the betrayal, the silence. And they didn't flinch. Didn't pity me. They listened. They told their own stories. Some were eerily similar. Some were worse. But every time I felt a little less alone. One night after a meeting, someone asked me if I ever thought about talking to Trevor again, about giving him another. And if those paths crossed again someday, maybe we'd be different people. Maybe we'd sit across from each other, coffee in hand, and talk not about what we were, but about who we became. But that was the future, and I'd finally stopped living in it. Now,